Dragonlance Chronicles, Book 1, Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Prelude, The Old Man. Tika Wayland straightened her back with a sigh, flexing her shoulders to ease her cramped muscles. She tossed the soapy bar rag into the water pail and glanced around the empty room. It was getting harder to keep up the old inn. There was a lot of love rubbed into the warm finish of the wood, but even love and tallow couldn't hide the cracks and splints in the well-used tables or prevent customers from sitting on an occasional splinter. The inn of the last home was not fancy, not like some she had heard about in Haven. It was comfortable. The living tree in which it was built wrapped its ancient arms around it lovingly, while the walls and fixtures were crafted around the boughs of the tree with such care as to make it impossible to tell where nature's work left off and man's began. The bar seemed to ebb and flow like a polished wave around the living wood that supported it. The stained glass in the window panes cast welcoming flashes of vibrant color across the room. Shadows were dwindling as noon approached. The inn of the last home would soon be open for business. Tika looked around and smiled in satisfaction. The tables were clean and polished. All she had left to do was sweep the floor. She began to shove aside the heavy wooden benches as Otik emerged from the kitchen, enveloped in a fragrant steam. "Should be another brisk day for both the weather and business," he said, squeezing his stout body behind the bar. He began to set out mugs, whistling cheerfully. "I'd like the business to be cooler and the weather warmer," said Tika, tugging at a bench. "I walked my feet off yesterday and got little thanks and less tips. Such a gloomy crowd. Everybody nervous, jumping at every sound. I dropped a mug last night, and I swear, Retark drew his sword." "Pah!" Otik snouted. "Retark's a soulless secret guard. They're always nervous. You would be too if you had to work for Hederick that faint." "Watch it," Tika warned. Otik shrugged. "Unless the Hyther cat can fly now, he won't be listening to us. I'd hear his boots on the stairs before he could hear me." But Tika noticed he lowered his voice as he continued. "Residents of Solus won't put up with much more. Mark my words. People disappearing, being dragged off to who knows where. It's a sad time." He shook his head. Then he brightened. "But it's good for business." "Until he closes us down," Tika said gloomily. She grabbed the broom and began sweeping briskly. "Even Theocrat need to fill their bellies and wash the fire and brimstone from their throats," Otik chuckled. "It must be thirsty work, haranguing people about new gods day in and day out. He's in here every night." Tika stopped her sweeping and leaned against the bar. "Otik," she said seriously, her voice subdued. "There's other talk, too. Talk of war. Armies massing in the north. And there are these strange hooded men in town hanging around with the high theocrat asking questions." Otik looked at the 19-year-old girl fondly, reached out and patted her cheek. He'd been father to her ever since her own had vanished so mysteriously. He tweaked her red curls. "War? He sniffed. "There's been talk of war ever since the cataclysm. It's just talk, girl. Maybe the theocrat makes it up just to keep people in line." "I don't know," Tika frowned. The door opened. Both Tika and Otik started in alarm and turned toward the door. They had not heard footsteps on the stairs, and that was uncanny. The inn of the last home was built high in the branches of the mighty Valenwood tree, as was every other building in Solus, with the exception of the blacksmith shop. The townspeople had decided to take to the trees during the terror and chaos following the cataclysm, and thus Solus became a tree town, one of the few truly beautiful wonders left on Krynn. Sturdy wooden bridge walks connected the houses and businesses perched above the ground where 500 people went about their daily lives. The inn of the last home was the largest building in Solus and stood 40 feet off the ground. Stairs ran around the ancient Valenwood's gnarled trunk. As Otik had said, any visitor to the inn would be heard approaching long before he was seen. But neither Tika nor Otik had heard the old man. He stood in the doorway, leaning on a worn oak staff, and peered around the inn. The tattered hood of his plain gray robe was drawn over his head, its shadow obscuring the features of his face, except for his hawkish, shining eyes. "Can I help you, old one?" Tika asked the stranger, exchanging worried glances with Otik. Was this old man a secret spy? The old man blinked. You open? Well, Tika hesitated. Certainly, Otik said, smiling broadly. Come in, Greybeard. Tika, find our guest a chair. He must be tired after that long climb. Climb? Scratching his head, the old man glanced around the porch, then looked down at the ground below. Oh, yes, climb. A great many stairs. He hobbled inside and made a playful swipe at Tika with his staff. Get along with your work, girl. I'm capable of finding my own chair. Tika shrugged, reached for her broom, and began sweeping, keeping her eyes on the old man. He stood in the center of the inn, peering around as though confirming the location and position of each table and chair in the room. The common room was large and bean-shaped, wrapping around the trunk of the valenwood. The tree's smaller limbs supported the floor and ceiling. He looked with particular interest at the fireplace, which stood about 3/4 of the way back into the room. The only stonework in the inn, it was obviously crafted by dwarven hands to appear to be part of the tree, winding naturally through the branches above. A bin next to the side of the fire pit was stacked high with cordwood and pine logs brought down from the high mountains. No resident of Solus would consider burning the wood of their own great trees. There was a back route out of the kitchen. It was a 40-foot drop, but a few of Otik's customers found this setup very convenient, and so did the old man. He muttered satisfied comments to himself as his eyes went from one area to another. Then, to Tika's astonishment, he suddenly dropped his staff, hitched up his sleeves of his robes, and began rearranging furniture. Tika stopped sweeping and leaned on her broom. What are you doing? That table's always been there. A long, narrow table stood in the center of the common room. The old man dragged it across the floor and shoved it up against the trunk of the huge valenwood, right across from the fire pit, then stepped back to admire his work. There, he grunted. Supposed to be closer to the fire pit. Now, bring over 2 more chairs. Need 6 around here. Tika turned to Otik. He seemed about to protest, but at that moment, there was a flaring light from the kitchen. A scream from the cook indicated that the grease had caught on fire. Again, Otik hurried towards the swinging kitchen doors. He's harmless, he puffed as he passed Tika. Let him do what he wants, within reason. Maybe he's throwing a party. Tika sighed and took 2 chairs over to the old man as he requested. She set them where he indicated. Now, the old man said, glancing around sharply, bring 2 more chairs. Comfortable ones, mind you. Over here. Put them next to the fire pit, in the shadowy corner. It isn't shadowy, Tika protested. It's sitting in full sunlight. Ah, the old man's eyes narrowed. But it will be shadowy tonight, won't it? When the fire's lit? I suppose so, Tika faltered. Bring the chairs. That's a good girl. And I want one right here. The old man gestured at a spot in front of the fire pit. For me. Are you giving a party, old one? Tika asked as she carried over the most comfortable, well-worn chair in the inn. A party? The thought seemed to strike the old man as funny. He chuckled. Yes, girl. It will be a party, such as the world of Kryn had not seen since before the cataclysm. Be ready, Tika Whalen. Be ready. He patted her shoulder, tousled her hair, then turned and lowered himself, bones creaking, into the chair. A mug of ale, he ordered. Tika went to pour the ale. It wasn't until she had brought the old man his drink and gone back to her sweeping that she stopped, wondering how he knew her name. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and a comment so that I know that it's well received, and I'll probably continue to do this if there is enough positive response. Thank you for listening.